Hello, and welcome to today's episode. I am very excited to have two guests with me today to talk about someone that we all knew many years ago and whose cause for canonization is currently open. And the person that I'm speaking about is Michelle Christine Duppong. And some of you listening, whom I may have gone to University of Nebraska with you may already know her story. But for those of you who don't know her story, you are in for a treat in the sense of Michelle's life is one of true inspiration, not only in the way that she lived her life and the way that she pointed all of us to God, but also in the way that she suffered. And I'll share a little about that in a few minutes. But before that, really want to introduce you to our guests. I'm just so happy to have Stephany Anderson and Maria Benish here with me. And I first met Stephany just a few years, I guess, was it like 5 years ago? We did encounter school of ministry together. So yes, we did that together. And then Maria, I have known for many, many years. We went to high school and college together, and she discipled me when I was a student at the University of Nebraska Lincoln through Focus. So it's very wonderful to have friends on the show. And so without further ado, I'll have you go first, Stephany, and then Maria, if you could please introduce yourselves and what do you do and how did you meet Michelle?
Sure. Currently, I work for Focus. I'm in my 10th year with Focus, and I work with our alumni team. So we're working on building communities of mission around the country. And I also work on our big conference called Seek. So we've got a track specifically for adults that is just awesome. So work on those two big projects throughout the year with Focus. I live here in Colorado, and how I knew Michelle was when I was a freshman at South Dakota State University. It was the first year that Focus was there, and Michelle was on that team. So got to know her. I was thirsty to grow in my faith. She was building a discipleship chain, and so she was the one that kind of cast the vision for what does it mean to be a disciple and invited me into that.
Wonderful. And Maria.
Hi everyone, Maria Benish calling in from Lincoln, Nebraska. I currently serve as the Director of Pilgrimages for the National Eucharistic Congress and also as co-director of a Catholic nonprofit called the Before Gethsemane Initiative that sets out to promote racial reconciliation from a Catholic standpoint. And I got to know Michelle during my senior year of college. It was actually Michelle's first year as a focused missionary, and I had the blessing of being discipled by her. As Valentina mentioned earlier, I discipled Valentina, and Michelle discipled me. And so honored that I got to learn from such a holy woman.
Yes, and so this holy woman that we're going to talk about, and the reason why we're talking about her, not only like I mentioned, is her cause of canonization open, but there's actually this coming Tuesday a documentary that will be shown about her life called Radiating Joy, the Michelle Duppong story, and just want to encourage everyone listening to go out and watch it. But just so you get a little sneak peek about her life and why maybe it would be a good idea to watch. It is just want to share a little bit about her story, and then we're just going to go around and just share a little more stories about her life because it truly is an inspiration. And so, yeah, so Michelle was born in Haymarsh, North Dakota, and she was the fourth of six children and grew up on a farm doing all the farm chores, and she loved it. And so she was a horticulture major in college. And then, like Stephany mentioned, she ended up being a missionary with Focus for 6 years, and one of them being UNL, where I met her. And then Stephany, you mentioned you met her at South Dakota State. And so after of her time in Focus, she was the director of adult faith formation at the Diocese of Bismarck, North Dakota. And it was there in that time where she began to experience some sharp abdominal pain. And initially, the doctors thought that they were ovarian cysts. But then after some time, they were going to do some outpatient surgery. They found out that the doctor opened her up to find out that she was full of cancer. Her abdomen was full of cancer, and it was stage 4. and she was given 2 months to live. But by the grace of God, she lived for about a year, and she died on Christmas Day. And the remarkable thing about her life is, I don't know, maybe this is a bold statement to say that I akin it a little bit to John Paul II, in that when I think of his pontificate, I think of not only just like the joyful moments, but just that he showed us as a world how to suffer well with Christ. And I think in her last year, she truly just suffered well. I just remember reading stories about different nurses who were just touched by her love and concern for them over her own suffering. And just even that, like after she died, there were many people who reached out, I think, to the bishop who did her funeral mass to just say how much her life was touched by her. And so, yeah, I guess, is there anything you want to add to just what you guys know about her life and what your own experience with her?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think when we heard about her cause for canonization opening and the story of her life and the witness that she had, it wasn't surprising because I think all of us, having encountered her as a missionary, would agree that she was living for the Lord. And it's fun to go back and think about how she led our discipleship chain. When I went to Holy Hour with her, when I went to go pray in the morning with her, because all the missionaries would go and do mental prayer in the chapel and read scripture. I remember seeing her. I think an iconic story that I love to share with people is we had a little chapel at South Dakota State University, and our missionaries at 10 a.m. every morning would be in there praying in adoration. And over on the left side of the altar, Michelle would be there every day, and it's this little hidden spot where nobody could really see you. And for the first half of her holy hour, she was just like on her knees, bent over, worshiping the love of her life, worshiping God. Um, and and that's where her love, I think, really came from for all of us. Was that holy hour and her relationship with Jesus. And um, I remember being so inspired by just her commitment and her faithfulness to what it meant to follow Jesus and living Catholic culture in all kinds of ways, which I could go into. But Maria, what else do you remember about her?
Yeah, one of my favorite things about like Michelle's spirituality is her love for helping everyone recognize that they're called to be a saint. And she lived that out daily. And also her love for the poor souls in purgatory. One of my favorite memories with Michelle is her taking me to the Catholic cemetery here in Lincoln, Nebraska during November, the month of November, where we pray for all souls. And she really had a devotion for praying that everyone ends up in heaven with our Lord. So those were a couple things that really stood out to me. Another thing was she was very good about putting first things first and remembering that our ultimate mission is to get to heaven. I know my senior year, I was very stressed out with grades and kind of a lot of things of this world. And she really pulled me aside one day and she was like, you really got to remember that like your ultimate mission is to be a saint. And if you get a B in a class, it's not the end of the world. Like you still got to put prayer and other things first. And I still remember those words to this day, that's ultimately what matters and what's important.
Gosh, that reminds me of a message I was telling you ladies earlier about that I had sent to Michelle, and I recently found it again, where I was in Bible study with her, and after the Bible study, I guess I was really stressed out about something, but I sent her a message afterwards to just say, thank you so much just for your love and just how you prayed with me. It really uplifted me, and you really encouraged me to just be myself in this particular situation. And I'm just so grateful for your friendship. And just finding that again, this was like years later, like, oh, wow, like she really did have such an impact on me then and even now. And one thing slightly different memory of Michelle is I just remember her enthusiasm for life and just her spontaneity. Like I remember one night we were all at the missionary's house and she was like, hey, let's all go, let's just hop in the car and drive out into the cornfields and watch the stars. And we're all like, Michelle, this is like 11 o'clock at night. Because she's like, yeah. So we all went out there and it was like freezing cold, but it was so beautiful. And I actually have a picture. I'll have to post it in my newsletter, but we're all out there, like we're freezing, but like with just huge grins on our faces. And like, we're just like looking at the stars, and like, that was Michelle. Like, just
Absolutely. I
spontaneous.
feel like, I don't know how many people got to actually do this, but she would take some students up to her farm and she'd call it the Duppong experience. And what we did was take four-wheelers and drive around and play like on the haystacks in the middle of the night with your snow pants on, and like she was not afraid of cold. And it was just beautiful, and she had a good, you're right, she put first things first always, and fellowship and real friendship. She was just really good at modeling that well. And so I remember going up there one time, and during the day we had a picnic and we were hanging out, and then there's a chapel on their land, or near their land, called St. Clement's, and it's this old church that I don't think actually was a working parish during Michelle's lifetime, but she loved this old church. And she brought us all in there. We're all in our coats because it's cold. It's not heated in there. And she gives us a little fervorino on being saints and how we're called to sainthood. And then we just prayed for a little while. And after our prayer, we head back out and we're playing, and it's dark outside, and we go back in and get, caramel rolls, because that's what you have on the farm. And she just was so fun in that way. And she wasn't necessarily somebody who was like, I'm going to steal the show during a conversation. Like she was so sweet, but she rallied people around her, and it was fun to just be like, what are you thinking? Okay, great. Let's do it.
Yes,
Yeah, one of
yes.
my favorite things about her is her endearing love of Josh Groban. She was the one that first introduced me to his music, and she loved listening to his songs. She found them very inspiring. And then also Stephany, like I love you're talking about her North Dakota farm experience and stuff. I learned like some new phrases and words from her. Like I didn't know what cuddle duds were. And apparently that's the base layer of clothing that hardy North Dakotans wear underneath their clothes. And like she just said it so nonchalantly one day. I was like, a what? A cuddle what? So yeah, she was like spontaneous and full of life and joy. And I also just, so many of my memories with her actually just doing normal things. I a lot of times get asked if she was normal, and I want to like say wholeheartedly, absolutely. And in fact, like that's her whole thing. We're all called to be saints, right? It's not like you walk around with a halo on your head and act differently. And so like my memories with her, are, like cooking pasta, or her teaching me how to waltz, or us going for walks around the recreation center at our university on the track, like things like that.
Yes, she was, I agree. She was very much normal. And one thing I think one of you touched on was just that whenever she would talk, like at least whenever she would talk to me, I felt like I was the most important person like in the room. Like she just had a very good sense of presence and just truly listening. And I just, again, I think of JP too, like just when people would describe being around him, that they would just felt like they were the most important person. And Michelle really had a way of doing that. And it just, even to this day, I think of like when I want to be more present to those around me, I'm like, okay. She just inspires me to do that even more.
And I think as I watched her, she cultivated that. Like it was a choice to be aware of the people around her, and she cultivated it, and then she taught me how to do it. So I remember at the Newman Center, there was multiple times we'd have like 5 p.m. daily mass, and some people would kind of come in and then it's new to them or they don't know anybody, so at the very end of mass just kind of like sneak out the back door and off they go because they didn't want to feel uncomfortable. And she watched those people and followed them out of mass and reached out to them and said, hi, my name is Michelle, how are you, what's your name, can I invite you to this next thing we're doing? And I watched her do that a few times. I watched my discipler, now Sister Gianna, do that, who was discipled by Michelle. And then came my turn, and I thought like that's so great that they're doing that, And then they were like, Stephany, that girl just ran out. Go get her. And I was like, what? But it was so began to be like, okay, I modeled it for you. This is what's the most important thing. Now you go do it. And so I remember running up to this girl being like, hi, my name is Stephany. What's your name? I'm so glad you came to Mass. Do you want to come to, like, I don't know, the pumpkin carving thing that's happening here next week or whatever? And it was so beautiful that she was so attentive when it was at a social event or at Mass or if we were just on campus, noticing the people who were by themselves or who didn't feel like they were part of the group yet and being so intentional with them.
That brought her such joy too, Stephany. I am going to just give a teeny little sneak peek of something in the documentary. So there is a mutual friend of Michelle and I, Ashley Stevens, that's heavily featured in the documentary. And I still remember the first time that Michelle met Ashley at a Catholic event at our student center on campus. And I then had discipleship with Michelle the next day, and we're going for a walk around the rec center. And she was just so joyful that she was able to encounter this woman, Ashley, who was kind of curious about Catholicism and wasn't Catholic at the time. And honestly, I think spent at least 20 minutes just talking about how she can't wait to get to know her better. And she was so impressed with Ashley's willingness to step outside of her comfort zone. And so that really was something that brought Michelle great joy, was encountering people that were new to these events and, you know, discerning Catholicism, or maybe didn't know anybody. So yeah, definitely.
And so, Stephany, I would love to hear, with you working at Focus, what led to the process of Michelle's like her life being investigated for canonization?
Sure. So initially, well, first, I think a lot of people who loved Michelle and were impacted by Michelle came to her funeral. The church was packed, and it was, you know, like, she knew people all over the country. She was a missionary, you know, and also had treatment in Chicago and Minnesota, and so she knew a lot of people. And I would say a majority of the people who loved her weren't even able to come because, you know, it's the middle of winter, it's Christmas break. So that was already a witness of, wow, this woman had a big impact, that at her funeral, this church is overflowing and packed. It was at the cathedral in Bismarck. And so as we started talking more and more about her within Focus, we thought, you know, if nothing else, we would just love to gather some stories about her for our own missionaries, to give an example of virtue and character and what does it mean to be a missionary and live it well. And so Jess and Travis and I drove up to North Dakota and got some interviews of different people who knew her and were blown away by the stories that people were sharing about her life, which kind of transformed at some point into, hey, we shouldn't just make short little videos. We should make a documentary about her life. So they Googled, how do you put together a documentary? Because we weren't a video team or a camera team by any means. So like, okay, let's Google this. They put it together. So not Travis, Trevor was the main guy who like took all these stories and put it in this beautiful arc. And then about a year or two after we had created that, the Bishop of North Dakota, Bismarck, North Dakota, on the Feast of All Saints in 2022, officially opened her cause. And we were so excited about that because we were like, let me tell you, there is witness after witness after witness who is confident or would not be surprised that she would be a saint someday, because she was so beautiful, especially in the last year of her suffering. And so when that cause was open, then we handed that documentary process over to Anderson Arts, and they put the whole story together and really made the documentary that you're going to see on November 12th, and just telling the story of who Michelle is, the year that she was just really, I would say, purged. Like, her soul was just prepared to encounter her Lord, and then where she's at in her cause for canonization.
Oh, that's beautiful. Just thinking about that last year of her life, one of the things that I remember reading about was that she, even till the very end, prayed for healing, but yet at the same time was like open to God not answering that prayer. And I think that's remarkable, because I think it could be easy for someone to go to either extreme of like, I want healing, and I like that's the only option, or like, why even pray or for healing. But just for her, like, being in that happy middle, if you can say a happy middle of just like, Lord, like I desire healing, I desire wholeness, but at the same time, like, thy will be done. So I guess, can you speak a little bit to that, Stephany or Maria?
So I think a lot of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, honestly, and you see this intimate moment with him and the Father, and asking, like, if it's thy will that this cup pass for me, but thy will be done. And that was really what Michelle embodied. And so when I heard about that, I was not at all surprised. And just knowing her prior to her immense suffering that last year, it really just really speaks to the person that I knew. And I wasn't at all surprised when I heard about how beautifully she suffered.
Yeah. And some of the ways that she did suffer, because, there's a gamut of things you can go through in a medical journey, but as they were trying to take out the cancer, they're like, Michelle, we have to take out your uterus here. It is affected. And not only is that a physical pain, but emotionally, she was so broken that she wasn't going to be able to have her own children. That was really painful for her. She was dating somebody at the time. She was discerning marriage. She wanted to be married. She wanted to have a family. And to have to give that up and say, Jesus, I trust you, was a journey, was painful for her. And then there was a point where they were going to have to put tubes through her ribs. And the doctors were like, you're going to feel every breath. And she did. It was so painful. And you just think how many times you breathe in and breathe out. She felt it, which affected her sleep, her eating, everything. And as she was suffering through that, I remember she had tons of priests and seminarians and missionaries and all kinds of people visiting her. And she had a good handful of priests that had rallied around her that she had befriended. And I remember one of them talking in their interview about how she was like, I don't think I'm doing this well. Like, I'm journeying through this and I'm in pain, and it's not like, and I'm holy and God is with me. It's like, I have to fight to entrust this to the Lord. And am I doing this okay? She wanted to know, like, how do you do that? How do you suffer well? And this priest just kind of recollected, like, encouraging her that, like, you are doing it so beautiful. She was asking for the intercession of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati because she wanted him to have a miracle so he could become a saint. And she was seeking the Eucharist every day. She was asking, like, when she couldn't go to mass, and she wanted that. And Renee, her younger sister, who really accompanied her through this whole journey. It was in one of Michelle's last days, and they were able to bring her back home, and she was sitting there just looking at the sunrise on the farm in the kitchen. And as she walked in, she said, Renee, I want to go to mass. I need to receive Jesus. And Renee's like, I don't know, Michelle, we'll just have to just like see how today goes. And she goes, no, I need Jesus. And so they like figured out a way to get her to mass so she could receive Jesus. She was, she couldn't eat, she couldn't drink, she couldn't do anything, she couldn't sleep, but she knew the one thing she needed was Jesus. And like you said, she prayed for healing up until the day that she died. She trusted that God could do anything, and he could heal however he wanted, and he could use her story however he wanted. And but she knew she needed him, and she needed him in the Eucharist. And wow, such a witness.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah. I think that, like, her legacy is so important with that, because I think, like, instant gratification in our culture, and just like, how can we get rid of the suffering? And she is such a good reminder that suffering itself is a prayer and can be an act of intercession for others. And so that's something I think about a lot when there's certain sufferings we can't take away. My daughter has something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic condition where she doesn't have collagen in her skin. And so she gets cut and bruised very easily and usually has to have lots of stitches when she gets cut. And initially as a mom, when she first got diagnosed, like your instinct is to pray for that to be taken away from her. But now, several years later, I more feel called to just like pray for her to have the graces to accept this cross. And I think Michelle is such a good example of being able to truly embrace the crosses that God's handpicked for us, and that how those can become a beautiful act of prayer and intercession.
Yes, that reminds me of what St. Alphonsus Liguori always would say, that just being conformed to God's will is accepting whatever he gives us, the good with the bad, with everything in between. Because like you said, Maria, it's from the hand of a loving Father, that he's not just willy-nilly doling out suffering. It's for our sanctification and for those around us. And just to trust that it is for our good, even if it is challenging and it's not what we would rather be going through. But as we wrap up, there's something that I remember in one of the articles that was written about Michelle's life was after she died, and Stephany and Maria, please feel free to correct me on this, that after she died, I think it was the next morning, one of her sisters had just an image or just heard Michelle's voice where she said, and she's like, Lise, it's beautiful. Like it's absolutely beautiful. Do you remember? Okay, yeah, it was in an article that I read about her, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, just like, yes, like this is what it's all about, right? Like this is like what we've been saying. Our ultimate goal is heaven, and for her, I mean, apparently to have seen it, like to see it is just so encouraging.
Wow. I just remember at her funeral, it was during the Christmas season because she died on Christmas. And so her funeral was joyful. Just, I mean, beautiful. The music was beautiful. Everyone in that church missing her immensely, but so confident that she ran the race well and that she was seeking the Lord and that he was embracing her. She knew what she was made for. And so as painful as it was to be like, oh, we've been praying so hard that God would give her a miracle, and we've been asking God to heal her heart, and we want to keep her around because she's so wonderful in our lives. Even still, across the board, this beautiful, joyful celebration of this woman who ran the race well and we were all hoping so much so that like you're with the Lord and pray for us now, Michelle. Like we want to ask for you to be in our lives, and we want you to continue to like teach us what it means to be saints, because we want to be saints. We want to be running the race like you ran the race.
Yes. And so on that note, as you can see, she impacted our lives, but also many others. And if you have a story about Michelle's life, please feel free to send that in. I would love to read, and I'd love to share it with the Focus team. But yes, we just encourage you on Tuesday, November 12th, to go out and watch the documentary about her life. It should be showing in your area, or at least nearby. But yes, so thank you, ladies, for being here, for sharing your stories and your experience with Michelle. And it was really great just to chat with you and to see your lovely faces again.
Thank you, Valentina. This was so fun.
Yeah, this was really special. Thanks for organizing it, Valentina, and good to meet you, Stephany.
You too.
Absolutely. So thank you all for listening. And remember, when you say yes to God, you change the world. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.